Al Capone, notoriously known as Scarface, revolutionized organized crime during Prohibition in the 1920s. But how did the King of Chicago become the greatest mobster of all time? Capone's story starts in Brooklyn, New York in 1899. Capone's parents, Gabriel and Teresina Capone, emigrated from Italy at the time of his birth. Capone spent his early life near the Brooklyn Navy Yard with like-minded Italian immigrants. As Gabriel Capone's barbershop became more successful, he moved young Al and his family to a more affluent neighborhood called Garfield's Place. The beginning of an era. Shortly after the move to Garfield's Place, Capone began his life of crime. At only 6th grade, Capone quit school and joined Johnny Torrio's Five Pointers street gang. Johnny Torrio. Johnny Torrio ran the Five Pointers gang. He was Capone's mentor. He taught Capone everything he knew about racketeering, and he transformed organized crime into a corporate empire in the United States. Torrio left Brooklyn to assist Big Jim Colosimo in his criminal enterprises in Chicago. On the recommendation of Torrio, Capone became a bouncer for the Harvard Inn. The Harvard Inn was a brawl and brothel owned by Frankie Yale. Frankie Yale taught Capone the power of violence and intimidation. He also became a close friend and ally of Capone. During a bar fight at the Harvard Inn, Al Capone got a deep knife cut down his face, giving him the infamous nickname Scarface. After the incident, Capone moved to Baltimore to get an honest job as a bookkeeper with his wife, May Culhillan. The move to Chicago. Capone's honest job was short-lived. Capone moved to Chicago to assist Torrio in running a giant brothel business. This move was extremely significant in the rise of the future King of Chicago. Prohibition. The 18th Amendment, commonly known as the Volstead Act, prohibited the sale of alcohol throughout all 48 states. The act, passed in 1819, skyrocketed the success of gangsters and revolutionized the way organized crime operated. Prohibition enabled underground outings like speakeasies. Alcohol was smuggled from all over, whether it was from the border of Canada or quick ships from the Bahamas. Since most law enforcement opposed the Volstead Act, they were easily made corrupt by the manipulative ways of gangsters like Johnny Torrio, Dean O'Banion, but especially the notorious Al Capone. Al Capone was known for bribing police officers and elected politicians. Capone's connections made him practically untouchable.
People are going to drink. You know that. I know that. We all know that. And all I do is act on that.
Soon after Prohibition was put into act, Al became the manager of the Four Deuces, Torrio's headquarters in Chicago's Leave area. The Four Deuces was a gambling house, a distiller, a speakeasy, and any more illegal businesses you can imagine, all under one roof. Capone moved all racketeering operations to Cicero, Illinois, after his business in Chicago was threatened by law enforcement. Capone and his brothers Frank and Ralph controlled all operations in Cicero. It was almost impossible to convict the Capones because they took leading positions in the local government, giving them access to run brothels, gambling clubs, and racetracks. Al used violence as a vehicle to intimidate opponents and voters, often resulting in kidnappings and murders. Back as the Czar of Chicago. After a failed attempt for his life, Torrio retired from gang life and handed down all gambling dens, breweries, and speakeasies to Capone. Capone then moved his headquarters to the Metropole Hotel as an attempt to reinvent his status as a celebrity. Since Al was so confident that he was untouchable to law enforcement, he was often seen at public outings like the opera and parties. Contrary to other known gangsters at the time, Capone wanted his status to be publicly known to the world. Therefore, he dressed in ways to present himself as a respectable businessman as opposed to a cruel murderer. With the help of Frankie Yale, Capone set out to monopolize the transport of New York whiskey to Chicago. The transport of alcohol was making Capone uber rich. Going along with the trend of consumerism during the Roaring Twenties, Capone purchased expensive things like a 1928 bulletproof Cadillac and a mansion in Miami. Descending reputation. Al Capone was responsible for many, many murders, but many went unnoticed because killings like these were so frequent, and most were afraid to contest the intimidating Capone. That said, Capone's reputation was challenged when one of his hitmen accidentally killed Billy McSwiggan, known as the Hanging Prosecutor, during a shootout at a bar. Although Capone was not charged per usual, the murder created a public outcry to end gang violence and to defeat Capone. This outcry did not stop Capone, however. After a summer of hiding, Capone turned himself into the police, but the police could not come up with enough evidence to convict him. Capone made the police force look like fools because everyone knew he was guilty. Frustrations and murder. The rivalry between Dean O'Banion's gang in the north of Chicago and Capone's gang in the south of Chicago became increasingly hostile and intolerant. Capone's whiskey transports from New York was frequently hijacked, and Capone was realizing that Frankie Yale was no help to stop the issue. Frustrated, Capone murdered his longtime friend with a Tommy gun. In the next years, a back-and-forth saga of murders ultimately led to the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Here is a timeline of the killings that led to the massacre. The names in red are a part of O'Banion's gang, and the names in turquoise are a part of Capone's gang. In 1924, Dean O'Banion was killed by Yale, Scalise, and Anselm. In 1925, John Torrio was killed by Weiss, Drucci, and Morin. In that same year, an attempt for Capone's life was made by Weiss, Drucci, and Morin. In 1926, Earl Weiss was killed by two of Capone's gunmen. And lastly, in 1927, Vincent Drucci was killed by a police officer.
St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Moran, the only one left from O'Banion's gang, was left to run all Northside operations. Moran swore a vendetta against Capone, and soon after ordered his gunmen to kill several of Capone's top lieutenants. It is speculated that after those events, Capone had someone tell Moran that there was a hijacked shipment of whiskey that was being sold at a cheap price. Moran told the caller to meet him at his headquarters. That was a garage posing as a store. 7 of Moran's men, Adam Heyer, Franklin P. Gusenberg, John May, Albert Weinschak, James Clark, and Dr. Reinhard Schwimmer, were present in the garage. While waiting for the arrival of Moran, men dressed as police officers lined the 7 men against the wall and shot them to their deaths. While Capone did not admit to being behind the murders, it is greatly speculated that it was his doing. The murders destroyed the reputation of Capone. The end of Capone. In 1934, Capone was convicted of tax evasion and ended up in the notorious Alcatraz prison in San Francisco. He was paroled in 1939, where he spent his final days in his home in Miami, physically and mentally a wreck. That said, Capone will forever be known as the greatest mobster of all time.